In today's episode, we're looking at crocodile attacks that were recorded on camera. From a routine morning feeding at a sanctuary in northern Thailand to a tourist's fatal encounter at a luxury resort in Indonesia. But first, we begin in Queensland, Australia, where a veteran handler stepped too close to the edge and paid for it in seconds. It was February 11th, 2016, when the morning sun climbed over the low buildings of Capricorn Crocodile Farm, located approximately 30 miles west of Rockhampton in central Queensland. The facility housed over 4,000 crocodiles across various enclosures, operating as both a tourist attraction and a commercial breeding operation for leather production. Most of the animals were juveniles kept in long rows of grow-out pens behind the scenes, while only a handful of large adults were used for public demonstrations. The late summer heat had already settled in, with a hazy blue sky and temperatures climbing toward 89 degrees Fahrenheit by mid-morning. Trevor Doyle was a 38-year-old senior reptile handler who had worked at Capricorn for nearly 11 years. His daily responsibilities included feeding demonstrations, enclosure maintenance, and supervising junior staff during public tours. Doyle had developed a reputation for showmanship during feeding sessions, often narrating crocodile behavior to audiences while maneuvering within feet of the animals. Management had previously cautioned him about working too close to certain aggressive individuals, but Doyle's experience had bred a dangerous confidence. The morning feeding demonstration was scheduled for 10:30 a.m. in the main viewing arena, a concrete walled enclosure featuring a rectangular pool surrounded by elevated walkways where tourists could observe safely. Approximately 40 visitors had gathered that morning, many holding smartphones and cameras to document the spectacle. The facility's own security cameras recorded all activity in the arena from multiple angles. Standard procedure required a second staff member to remain outside the enclosure gate with keys and a radio, while another stood on the walkway with a control pole in case an animal surged at the edge. The arena itself was designed with a painted standoff line and a low inner rail meant to discourage handlers from stepping into the true strike zone. But during routine shows, the line was treated more like a suggestion than a hard rule, especially by veterans who thought they knew the animals. While the camera system covered much of the arena, blind spots remained near the waterline and beneath the elevated walkways. The footage that would later be reviewed captured only portions of what followed, with key moments obscured by splashing water, concrete barriers, and the rapid movement of both the handler and the animal. Investigators relied on a combination of video, eyewitness accounts, and injury patterns to reconstruct the full sequence of events. The target crocodile was a 17-foot saltwater male named Rocco, estimated at approximately 60 years old and weighing close to 1,400 pounds. Rocco had arrived at the facility in 2002 after being captured near a populated area following several livestock kills. His size and aggressive temperament made him a popular attraction, though handlers had learned to approach him with caution during the decade he had been in captivity. Doyle entered the enclosure carrying a long pole with fresh chicken suspended from the end, his standard method for conducting feeding demonstrations. The protocol required handlers to remain at least 15 feet from the water's edge during feeding, using the pole's length to maintain distance. However, Doyle had developed a habit of closing that gap during demonstrations, believing his experience allowed him to read warning signs that less experienced staff might miss. Rocco had been motionless in the water for over 20 minutes, his massive body submerged with only his eyes and nostrils visible above the surface. The crocodile's dark olive coloring blended seamlessly with the algae-tinted water, making his exact position difficult to pinpoint from the tourist's elevated perspective. To experienced handlers, that stillness wasn't calm. It was a loaded spring. Saltwater crocodiles often park beneath an edge, conserving energy and waiting for movement that looks like food. From the walkway, tourists could see only the eyes, but staff knew the rest of the body was angled like a trap, tail coiled, back legs tucked, head pointed toward the shallow ledge where feedings usually happened. The second staff member on the walkway later told investigators they'd noticed Rocco drifting closer in small, almost lazy adjustments. Barely a ripple. It was the kind of movement you miss if you're talking to a crowd, but it's the kind of movement that changes everything. Saltwater crocodiles represent the largest living reptile species, with mature males in northern Australia regularly exceeding 16 feet in length and weighing over 2,000 pounds in exceptional cases. These apex predators possess the strongest bite force of any living animal, capable of generating pressures exceeding 3,700 pounds per square inch. Their hunting strategy relies on explosive ambush attacks, launching from water with devastating speed, to clamp onto victims before executing violent death rolls designed to disorient prey and cause massive trauma. Despite their enormous size, saltwater crocodiles can accelerate from stillness to full attack speed in less than 1 second, closing distances of 15 feet before most humans can react. Doyle stepped past the painted standoff line and leaned over the low inner rail, approaching within 8 feet of the water's edge as he dangled the chicken roughly 3 feet above the surface and explained how crocodiles use their powerful tails for propulsion. The attack happened faster than the human eye could process. Rocco surged from the pool in a violent forward and up lunge, his head and shoulders clearing the concrete lip as his jaws snapped shut around Doyle's right arm just above the elbow. The bite didn't just puncture, it locked, pinning the limb in place as pressure and twisting force tore through muscle and opened major vessels in seconds. The shock of it stole Doyle's footing, and the slick concrete at the edge gave him nothing to brace against. The sudden force of the strike knocked Doyle off balance, dragging him down and sideways over the pool's edge as the crocodile's weight and grip pulled both bodies into the water. Doyle's screams cut through the morning air as Rocco began the death roll, spinning his massive body in rapid, violent rotations while maintaining his grip on the handler's arm. During the violent rolling, the force wrenched Doyle's shoulder out of place, tearing ligaments and muscle as his body was whipped through the water. Tourist cameras captured the churning chaos of thrashing water and the brief glimpses of Doyle's face breaking the surface, his mouth open in silent agony before being pulled under again. The security footage captured critical portions of the attack from multiple angles. Though rapid movement, water spray, and structural blind spots obscured parts of the struggle as Rocco continued rolling, each surge of motion tearing additional tissue from Doyle's arm. The violent rolling lasted only seconds before the crocodile's body bumped the concrete wall, and the angle robbed it of a clean, continuous spin. Doyle managed to wrench himself free and surface in a burst of foam, clawing toward the nearest edge with his left hand. But as he lunged for the concrete, Rocco surged again from just beneath the surface, more a snap than a full strike, catching Doyle across the lower ribs and dragging him back into the water before slipping away into the deeper section of the pool. The second bite clamped onto Doyle's torso just below his ribcage, the massive jaws crushing several ribs and penetrating deep into his abdominal cavity. Rocco surged into a brutal thrash, jerking side to side and attempting short roll motions against the concrete, while Doyle's body went limp as consciousness faded from blood loss and shock. The fatal damage occurred during this second attack, with Rocco's teeth lacerating major blood vessels and causing catastrophic internal hemorrhaging. 2 junior handlers rushed along the elevated walkway, staying outside the inner barrier rather than entering the arena. One hammered the metal rail with a control pole, while the other blasted a compressed air horn in short, aggressive bursts. Noise and vibration meant to break the animal's focus long enough for a retreat. When Rocco slipped back toward deeper water, they dropped a looped rope line and extended poles toward Doyle, snagging his shirt and dragging him the last few feet to the edge without putting another person within reach. Doyle was unconscious when he was dragged from the pool, his right arm barely attached at the upper tissue, and his torso showing massive crushing trauma. The facility's first aid response began immediately. Pressure dressings, improvised tourniquet attempts, and CPR as staff radioed emergency services. An emergency helicopter was dispatched and arrived roughly 20 minutes later after a landing zone was secured. The park maintained a cleared landing strip used for livestock transfers and medical incidents, which staff sprinted to reopen and mark while others continued life-saving efforts. But the blood loss was too fast and too severe, and Doyle was pronounced dead before he could be stabilized for transport. The investigation conducted by state wildlife officials reviewed all camera footage and determined that Doyle had violated established safety protocols by approaching too close to the water's edge. Capricorn Crocodile Farm suspended public feeding demonstrations indefinitely following the incident and implemented mandatory minimum distance requirements for all handler interactions with large crocodiles. While the Queensland facility had claimed an experienced handler thousands of miles away in Southeast Asia, another crocodile farm would soon demonstrate how quickly routine feeding operations could turn fatal. It was August 17, 2014, in the rural outskirts of Samut Prakan Province, Thailand, approximately 25 miles southeast of Bangkok. The region supported dozens of commercial crocodile farms, ranging from professionally managed operations to marginal setups with questionable safety standards. Wichai Sri Songkram was a 46-year-old farmer who had operated a modest crocodile farm for nearly 15 years. maintaining approximately 60 animals across 3 concrete enclosures. His operation supplied juvenile crocodiles to larger facilities, while occasionally harvesting adults for leather. Wichai had learned crocodile husbandry from his father, who had established the farm in the 1980s during Thailand's crocodile farming boom. The farm's layout was functional but minimal. 3 rectangular concrete pits, each measuring approximately 40 feet by 20 feet, held the crocodiles in conditions crowded enough to require careful monitoring for aggression. Raised wooden walkways provided access for feeding and maintenance, while a small office building housed butchering equipment and refrigeration. The facility operated without formal accreditation and had never been inspected by wildlife authorities. Security cameras had been installed 6 months earlier after a series of nighttime thefts from nearby farms. The system consisted of 4 cameras covering the enclosures and entrance areas, recording continuously to a digital storage unit in the office. The footage would later become the only comprehensive record of what transpired that morning. Wichai's daily routine began at 6 a.m. with feeding, when the crocodiles were most active and responsive. He worked alone most mornings, as his 2 part-time employees arrived later to handle cleaning and maintenance tasks. The feeding process involved tossing whole fish and chicken parts into the enclosures from the wooden walkways, a method that minimized direct contact while still requiring the handler to lean over the edge to ensure even food distribution. Most of the crocodiles in the pit were farm-bred stock, but the dominant animal was different. A larger saltwater specimen Wichai had acquired secondhand, because few small farms could safely manage a crocodile at the upper end of the size range. Wichai estimated the male at over 13 feet and roughly 900 pounds, and he'd had it for nearly 8 years, after taking it off the hands of an operation that couldn't keep it contained. Even in a crowded enclosure, the big male held the best position near the feeding edge and routinely displayed dominance. Jaw gaping, tail slaps, and short charges that forced smaller animals to give way. In crowded commercial enclosures, feeding time creates intense competition. Crocodiles conditioned to regular food delivery often rush toward movement along the enclosure edge, especially when a handler leans into the strike zone. Over time, habituation to human presence reduces avoidance behavior without diminishing predatory capability, creating animals that approach rather than retreat during feeding. Wichai had completed feeding the 2 smaller enclosures and was working his way along the walkway beside the largest pit, tossing fish to the crocodiles below. The security camera footage shows him leaning forward over the railing, his upper body extending approximately 3 feet beyond the walkway's edge as he attempted to throw food toward the far corner of the enclosure. The large male had been resting near the walkway's support posts, partially concealed by the angle of the concrete wall. As Wichai leaned forward, the crocodile lunged upward with explosive force, its massive jaws clearing the walkway's edge and clamping onto Wichai's left upper arm near the shoulder, as his forward-leaning posture drove his torso hard against the concrete edge. The bite crushed his collarbone instantly, the teeth penetrating deep into his chest cavity and puncturing his left lung. The crocodile's momentum pulled Wichai forward, his legs lifting off the walkway as his upper body was dragged over the railing. He fell approximately 6 feet, landing partially in the water while the crocodile maintained its grip. The death roll began immediately. The massive reptile twisted its body violently, spinning Wichai through the water in rapid rotations that disoriented him completely while causing catastrophic tissue damage. The security footage captured the churning water and the brief moments when Wichai's face broke the surface, his expression frozen in shock and agony. After several seconds of violent rolling, disrupted by the confined space and movement of other animals in the pit, the crocodile released its initial grip and repositioned, its jaws now clamping onto Wichai's head and neck. The crushing pressure collapsed his neck and airway, cutting off breathing and causing rapid, fatal blood loss. Consciousness fled within seconds as blood loss and head trauma overwhelmed his system. The other crocodiles in the enclosure began moving toward the commotion, drawn by the thrashing and the blood spreading through the water. Other crocodiles moved toward the disturbance as the dominant male maintained control near the body, with additional biting occurring amid jostling movement as the water churned. The first employee arrived at the farm approximately 45 minutes later, immediately noticing the empty bucket on the walkway and the disturbed water in the large enclosure. Security footage was reviewed, confirming the attack sequence. Police and rescue personnel arrived within 2 hours, but recovery of Wichai's remains proved extremely difficult, with 15 aggressive crocodiles defending their enclosure. Wildlife authorities secured the perimeter and used a slow, methodical process to regain control of the pit, using makeshift shields along the pit edge, throwing bait to draw the cluster away from the remains, and lowering the water level enough to limit sudden surges, while they kept the dominant male pushed back near the far corner, long enough for recovery hooks to be deployed. Only once the water surface calmed and the animals were held back behind makeshift shields did recovery teams move in to retrieve what remained of Witch Eye's body. The investigation concluded that inadequate safety barriers and working alone had directly contributed to the fatal outcome. The facility was permanently closed, and the surviving crocodiles were transferred to larger operations with stricter containment and staffing rules. While Thailand's farmlands had witnessed a handler's final moments, the luxury resorts of Indonesia would soon prove that even carefully controlled tourist environments could harbor deadly threats. It was July 9, 2017 at Sundara Cove Resort, an upscale property located along the southern coast of Bali near Nusa Dua. The resort featured multiple swimming pools, direct beach access, and carefully maintained tropical landscaping designed to create an atmosphere of paradise. Among the property's amenities were 2 large decorative ponds stocked with koi fish and surrounded by lush vegetation, intended as scenic focal points for guests. Marcus Chen was a 34-year-old software engineer from San Francisco who had arrived at the resort 3 days earlier with his wife, Rebecca, for a delayed honeymoon. The couple had spent their days exploring temples, beaches, and local markets before returning each evening to the resort's amenities. Marcus had a habit of morning exercise, typically swimming laps in the main pool before breakfast. The morning was warm and humid, with temperatures already reaching 82 degrees Fahrenheit by 6:30 a.m. when Marcus left his room. The main pool area was being cleaned, prompting Marcus to explore alternative locations for his morning routine. He noticed the larger of the 2 decorative ponds near the resort's eastern gardens, a body of water measuring approximately 60 feet long and 30 feet wide, with a maximum depth of around 5 feet. The pond's purpose was purely ornamental, with resort management having posted small signs indicating it was not for swimming. However, the signs were discreet and easily overlooked, written in Indonesian with smaller English translations underneath. The pond's clear water and inviting appearance gave no indication of danger. What Marcus could not have known was that a juvenile saltwater crocodile, measuring approximately 4 to 5 feet in length, had entered the pond only days earlier through a drainage canal connected to a nearby mangrove estuary during high tide, becoming trapped when water levels dropped. Resort staff had not yet discovered its presence, as the crocodile remained hidden among dense water plants during daylight hours. Security cameras positioned to monitor the garden pathways had partial views of the pond area, though the angles were designed to observe walkways rather than water features. The footage would later show portions of what transpired, though significant portions of the attack occurred outside the camera's fields of view. What the cameras did capture, Marcus stepping into the pond, the sudden burst of thrashing near the center, and staff sprinting in with poles, matched the later phone video taken during the recovery, creating a grim, stitched-together timeline of the incident. Marcus entered the water at approximately 6:45 a.m., wading in from the shallow end near a decorative waterfall feature. The water appeared clear near the surface, though plant beds and shadowed areas toward the deeper end obscured visibility below. He began swimming slow laps across the pond's length, his strokes steady and relaxed as he enjoyed the quiet morning. Juvenile saltwater crocodiles, despite their smaller size, are fully capable of inflicting fatal injuries. Even younger animals can inflict deep punctures and tearing wounds, and their ambush instincts mirror those of larger adults. The crocodile had been resting among water plants near the pond's deep end, its presence completely undetected by Marcus as he swam. When Marcus's third lap brought him within striking range, the juvenile launched its attack. The crocodile surged forward and clamped onto Marcus's right lower leg just below the knee, its teeth punching through skin and muscle as it thrashed sideways in the shallow water. The force wasn't a clean snap so much as a violent wrench, enough to tear tissue and open fast-bleeding wounds while yanking him off balance. Marcus screamed as he went under, swallowing water as his hands clawed for the surface. The struggle was violent and disorienting, more thrashing than a clean, powerful roll, as Marcus kicked and the crocodile wrenched side to side in the shallow water. Each surge tore at the wound and pulled him under again, and the panic of fighting for air set in almost immediately. After a few seconds, the crocodile released its grip momentarily, leaving Marcus scrambling for the surface, coughing and gasping. one leg kicking weakly as blood feathered behind him. He tried to half swim, half crawl toward the edge using only his arms, but the crocodile surged again, this time catching higher on the thigh in a quick clamp and pull. The second strike dragged him under in a short, frantic struggle, and the combination of blood loss, panic, and repeated submersion began to shut his body down. A resort gardener arriving for his morning shift heard the splashing and screaming from approximately 100 yards away. He ran toward the pond, arriving to see Marcus floating face down near the center, the water around him dark with blood. The crocodile surfaced briefly 15 feet away before submerging again. The gardener immediately radioed resort security while running toward the maintenance building to retrieve a long pole. 2 security guards arrived within 3 minutes, one filming on his mobile phone as they attempted to determine how to safely extract Marcus from the water. Staff hesitated, fully aware that entering the water would likely draw the animal back toward them. They kept a distance behind landscaping barriers, using long maintenance poles and loud noise to track the crocodile's position before attempting any recovery. Additional staff arrived with ropes and poles, eventually managing to hook Marcus's body and pull it toward the shallow end while keeping the poles between themselves and the water. He was pulled from the pond approximately 9 minutes after the initial attack, after the crocodile disengaged and remained submerged near the far end. His right lower leg and left thigh showed deep puncture and tear wounds with heavy bleeding, and his skin had already taken on the gray, drained look of a drowning victim. The injuries were severe, but it was the repeated submersion, combined with rapid blood loss, that proved fatal. Resort medical staff began emergency treatment immediately, applying tourniquets to both legs while waiting for ambulance transport. Marcus had lost consciousness and showed no pulse. Despite aggressive CPR efforts, he could not be resuscitated. The combination of massive blood loss, drowning, and traumatic shock had proven fatal. Indonesian wildlife authorities arrived later that morning and successfully captured the juvenile crocodile using baited traps. Investigation revealed the drainage canal connection that had allowed the animal to enter the property. The resort implemented immediate modifications to prevent future wildlife access and installed prominent multilingual warning signs around all water features. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.